Okay, everybody comfortable? Cell phones off, right? Okay, here we go.
From Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the interior of my personal vehicle, you are listening to Quick Considerations on For Your Consideration. This is kind of a side podcast for when I or Dustin and I go and check out a movie in the theaters and want to do a little episode about it. So, with me today is my esteemed co host, Dustin Friesenhan.
And with me today is my also esteemed co-host, Mike Jozic.
And the film that we're talking about today is the recently released Caligula, the Ultimate Cut.
The cut-up of the original 1980 classic?
This was a film that is notorious throughout kind of cinematic history. It was produced by Bob Guccione of Penthouse, directed by Tinto Brass, and it stars Malcolm McDowell, Teresa Ann Savoy, Helen Mirren, Peter O'Toole, John Gielgud. It was written by Gore Vidal, and it had a lot of hardcore porn in it. So it was kind of this really taboo, lots of sex, lots of violence, with major theater and film stars in it. So it kind of had this infamous reputation.
It was effectively the biggest, well, it was the biggest independent production at that point in time. And you can really see that Guccione really believed in it. He wanted to make porn art, sort of like the conversation we have nowadays about our video games art. It seems like he wanted to do the same thing for hardcore smut. Now, the question is, did he achieve it? And is it even possible?
To be fair, I do think that Guccione was legitimately just trying to make film. He also produced the Romeo and Juliet film. There was, I can't remember if it was Penthouse Productions. It had to have been. They had a part in producing like Chinatown as well, if I'm not mistaken. If you wait till like the end of the credits, it's in there as one of the production companies. I think he just wanted he loved film and wanted to legitimately be a part of film. But I think because of the cost, and I think because of how he knew to make money, he was just like, let's throw in some hardcore porn. So there was this film that was written by famous author Gore Vidal, and I think the intentions were to make an epic biopic of the Roman Emperor Caligula, and then it just sort of went sideways from there.
At the beginning, we were told of how sideways the production went, with so many of the big names associated with it leaving, not wanting their names on it, saying how this was a problem, that was a problem, and it took a couple of years to get released even after that. And then, of course, in the 1980s, hardcore porn in cinemas, we were told of the history of it being pulled from the theater in Edmonton right off the reels as it was playing, and then the theater itself being brought to court over smut charges, basically.
Yeah, it was literally like a Supreme Court case in Canada where this film was considered obscene and incendiary. Ultimately, I believe those charges ended up getting dropped, but this is the reason why the film has the notorious reputation that it's had for years. Now, a new cut was created. This was always a film that Malcolm McDowell and many involved had kind of looked back on, and they were like, this is not the film that we kind of signed on for and that we thought we were filming. So,
in spite of a lot of nudity and a lot of weirdness, I almost wonder what it's like for an actor, because you don't see the edit. You see the scenes as you're in them, and I've heard a lot of stories of actors who don't know exactly what the film's going to be, what the plot is, what if their character dies or not, until, of course, they see the film themselves, because you film a lot of stuff that doesn't make it into the movie. You do it in different orders. So I could understand not necessarily knowing what the film was you signed on for, but they were naked a whole lot. Malcolm McDowell was groping a lot of people. There was a lot of stuff in there that didn't seem very artistic, is what I'm saying.
McDowell himself has said that the script that he thought they were doing is not what he saw on screen. And there was never really any kind of successful attempt to do a restructuring of the film or a restoration of the film, because it was believed that the film elements were lost to history, to whatever mismanaged assets. And they did manage to actually find a cut of the film. There's a for anybody who's interested, there's a great podcast that kind of covers the history of the film, the original film, plus the restoration and the new cut, which I will add in the show notes if you want to go check that out, because we're not going to be talking about that extensively here. But they found these elements, and so a restoration was undertaken, and they put the film back together. They added on an introductory animated segment that was done by Dave McKean, who's an award-winning graphic novelist and fine artist, and multimedia artist as well, and filmmaker. He was director of Mirror Mask and Luna and some really interesting Photoshop ads.
And honestly, given that it was done as rotoscopy, I could have seen it as something that fits with the era that the film was made, as opposed to if they did some sort of CG thing.
Yeah, it didn't really stand out as, I mean, if I didn't know that it was an additional piece, I think I probably would have assumed that it was from the original film.
I've actually seen the original film, but it was so long ago that I didn't know whether or not that was added or not. So that just lets you know how much it worked with it.
Yeah, Dustin had seen the original film. I had not. And so this was my first time experiencing this. Not sure if that affects either of our opinions, but traditionally when we do regular For Your Consideration episodes, Dustin starts in with his opinions. So I'm going to give Dustin first crack at your first thoughts and feelings about Caligula, the Ultimate Cut.
Well, all I have to base it off of comparatively is sort of some vague memories of the original one. And I remember very little about the original one. There's a few things that I sort of got reminded of. Malcolm McDowell shouting about how he is God, which honestly sort of fits in sort of to a pantheistic sort of belief system. I kind of appreciated it this time around.
Matthew Sweet actually has a song that uses that as the intro.
Navicon Torture Technologies has all sorts of fun movie clips spattered throughout that can be very interesting. But I remember some distinct hardcore porn in the original cut, where I've read later on that it was spliced in just at random by Guccione, which really surprised everybody. And it really did feel that way. I remember one scene where just cut to two women who were looking through a peephole at what was going on. Then they have sex. Then it moves back to whatever scene was going on. And it had nothing to do with anything. It was just, hey, look, here's porn. Watching it this time with, I don't know, more enlightened or just older eyes, it all felt very exaggerated. It's a lot of famous stage actors, Peter O'Toole, Helen Mirren, McDowell, and so on and so forth, and you can tell that it's very much stage acting. It's very exaggerated. People are shouting nonsense. When the crow flies in the first time and McDowell just screams like a banshee, it's humorous, and honestly, it takes me out of it a fair bit every now and then. You get some serious points where they're acting fairly normal, and then boom, there they are being unnecessarily larger than life. And I felt that way with the music. I felt that way with some of the scenes and the way things were happening. I don't doubt that there were orgies and stuff happening back in the day, but it seemed weirdly gratuitous, and yet at the same time, not gratuitous enough to be titillating. It felt very much, hey, look at how edgy we are. And it probably was a lot more so in the 80s, but I grew up with the internet, so this is nothing.
I agree with you about the the stage quality of it. It is, like you said, British stage actors. They are very much bringing a stage performance. Even the way that Tinto Brass shoots the movie, it has kind of a stage theatrical feel to it. The way the sets are, there's not a lot of.
They were glorious sets, though.
They were. I mean, it's beautiful costumes, beautiful sets, but it kind of felt to me sometimes like a side-scrolling video game where you only really had this space to work with and you could kind of move back and forth left or right. I didn't necessarily think that was a bad thing, and much like the nudity, once you see a little bit of it, you kind of become or I became numb to it. So
I certainly didn't feel as much of it towards the latter half of the movie, but they'd already lost me early on.
The style of acting and the titillation factor, like those things sort of fell to the wayside as just the tonal style of the film. And so for me, it was mostly just watching and evaluating the film as a film. And I don't think it's a great film, but I don't think it's a bad film. Having not seen the original, I don't know if this is a drastic improvement. I know that Malcolm McDowell himself has felt vindicated with this cut as far as his performance. Tinto Brass was not consulted. So the director was left out of it, which I think kind of cheesed him off a little bit. But
I'm not too sure why he'd be so happy with his performance, especially at the very beginning. I got so much Clockwork Orange vibes from the way he was bouncing around like a goon.
I did as well. I did as well. Like, there's a lot of Alex in that performance. I liked McDowell in the movie.
I liked him a bit more in the latter half. At the beginning, though, I did like Peter O'Toole. He was great as Tiberius?
Oh God, I can't remember. I don't know. I think he was Tiberius.
I believe it was Tiberius, and like I remembered some historical facts as I was watching his performance when he is in that giant pool and all the babies there that were sort of suckling at little dildos, because he was kind of known for having like infants and whatnot sort of raised to nibble on his junk, and he called them his little minnows. Basically, Roman emperors, sick motherfuckers, you know, they're just the worst.
I really thought Helen Mirren and Teresa Ann Savoy were great as, I think Savona was the name of Mirren's character, and Drusilla, who played Caligula's sister. So just to cut in here for a moment and make a correction, throughout the rest of the episode, I do refer to Helen Mirren's character in the film as Savona, and the name of the character is actually Caesonia. I swear the audio in the theater was not the best, and it was honestly hard to catch a lot of characters' names. So just in case every time you hear Savona, you want to like punch a hole in the wall or scream at the heavens, we do know that it is actually Caesonia, and it was just the nature of recording in the car after seeing the film. So anyways, with that taken care of, back to the show. I thought they were great. I really enjoyed any scenes that they were in and the drama that they brought to the scenes. I felt the most emotionally invested when they were on screen. And
I started getting really into Longinus.
he's also really good. Yeah, like there were certain characters that when they were around, I just all of a sudden started focusing on it. But it's a long film, and I realized they're sort of telling the life of Caesar Caligula, but
I almost felt as though they weren't really telling his life, just that, okay, here's him right before he becomes Caesar, now here's a smattering of crazy shit that he did, and now he's dead.
Well, it's kind of his rise and his fall. It's how he becomes the emperor and how his excesses and
except I find it hard to
craziness
see,
leads to his downfall.
I find it hard to see sort of the rise portion. It's more so that he inherits it, just pure, hey, I happen to be this guy's family because everyone else was killed beforehand. There was no rise. Everyone else was already dead.
There was a plot to kill Peter O'Toole. He gets, is it Macro? there's so many characters and so many names, and we're just out of the theater.
He
So
gets his buddy to help him kill off Peter O'Toole, and then he kills off his buddy and just kills a bunch of other people, pisses people off. But you never actually know the state of the Empire. Every now and then someone says,
true.
that's going to be too expensive. I don't really feel a rise and a fall. It's all very static because he's always got money for himself. He's always throwing lavish parties. He doesn't really discuss anything in the Empire. And even when he goes out to see the people in the streets the one time, he's just in the dungeons and some streets for a little bit. You don't get a feeling for what's going on elsewhere.
There is a scene in the film where it's Longinus and a couple other people, and they're talking about the state of the Empire and basically saying like he's going to be the ruin. And somebody says, he's kind of ruined a couple of senators' lives, and there's like weird shit going on.
But the Empire is okay.
But the Empire
safe.
is fine, yeah.
Even though he's a tyrant, it's okay because
It's
the Empire
contained.
won't fall.
So his crazy is contained to Rome, and I think that's also part of Caligula's dissatisfaction, because he's like, I need to be remembered. What am I going to be remembered as? I don't have any wars. I don't have anything to distinguish myself with for the history books. And I will say that like they don't seem to go into why Caligula is so crazy. Like, is he doing this because he's nuts? Is he doing this to be remembered? Is he doing this because there's nothing else going on? Is he just...
Is it lead poisoning from the aqueducts?
Is he just throwing shit at the walls and seeing like what sticks? Because he does seem very fickle, and his whims very spurious.
He's sort of trying to feel anything, and he's just, yeah, as you said, throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. Anything that captures his imagination at any point, he just does. And he sort of learned that from Peter O'Toole. At first, he was a little surprised and shocked when like Peter O'Toole had the one guard basically drink wine until he died and then gutted him just because he could, just for no real reason. But what I've always thought of when it comes to Roman emperors, and most emperors, especially generational ones, you can see that it generally starts with a conqueror, in this case Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and they take it over and they run the empire pretty well. They grow it and it's doing pretty decent. Then a bit of nepotism goes on, a couple generations, and they're raised in a lap of luxury, and they have no wants, no needs, and that just drives people absolutely crazy. Look at the extremely rich we have nowadays, and they are so out of touch with reality that if they had the unchecked power of an emperor, would they not be just murdering people wholesale? As far as we know, they might very well be. Look at Epstein.
There is definitely, it's in the film, it's part of the text, his dissatisfaction, or not dissatisfaction, his disdain. He holds the Senate and the citizens of Rome in complete disdain. He
Shouting out about how they're all sheep and getting them to baw at him.
Yeah, and
Yet he kills anyone who disagrees with him. So it's like, what do you want, buddy?
he plays to the people, and he hates the elite.
Although I was reminded when he caused them all to baw about a song I heard in a Sunday school recently. And it's, I just want to be a sheep, ba, 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 ba. It's like, man, you call someone a sheep when they're a blind follower. It's probably not the best look to make your religion seem like a cult. I don't know. I'm just saying that's not the song to have children sing, but.
Probably my biggest problem with the movie is it's supposed to be like the excesses are supposed to be the violence, the sex. And I actually...
Not that there was too much violence. To be
No.
honest.
Well, there's a bit at the end where they get rid of Caligula's daughter. That was pretty brutal.
That was pretty funny.
But, and Caligula himself and his wife.
And then, of course, the weird threshing wall that they had at one point. But all that they cut away very quickly. They didn't bask in the blood or anything like that.
I feel like that was sort of supposed to be the excess of the film. And I'll grant you that because of time and because of just how social mores have changed, it doesn't feel as crazy or out of the boundaries of good taste per se.
You could hear it in the audience, the things that would still be considered shocking. A lot of stuff they just laughed at.
That audience pissed me off. I have
It's
to
very
say,
childish, very childish.
it was super childish because, like, I mean, it's not like this movie was really deep, heavy drama, but the stuff that they were laughing about and reacting to, it was the equivalent of, you know, finding the fart joke funny or being like, oh, I saw a penis, titter titter. And it's like, come on, guys.
To be fair, though, they're probably coming to see this film because they've heard those rumors about it. So they're people looking to be shocked. They're people who are desensitized to this kind of thing. This is the kind of film that they'll seek out.
I kind of felt like a lot of people there were treating it like we were watching Rocky Horror or something.
Yes, I definitely got that vibe, 100%.
And I'm like, man, get the fuck out of here. To finish my thought, though, I feel that the actual excess of the film is the length of the film. And I do think
It
I mean-
crippled the pacing.
this ultimate cut, it might legitimately be, you know, sort of like Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? Like they gave him the opportunity to reassemble his film and he was like, this is my one chance. I'm going to put everything back in, even the stuff I would have normally cut out for a
Yeah.
theatrical release. I kind of feel like maybe when the ultimate cut got assembled, it was the same logic. It's like, let's restructure this, but let's put kind of everything back in so that people can see all the glorious sets and all the glorious acting and all the glorious everything. And I don't know. I think it could have used some trimming.
So many scenes seemed unnecessary or dragged on far too long, almost as though they were chewing the scenery without bothering to put any scenery in their mouth, I guess.
The narrative gets lost. It genuinely gets lost.
As I said, I didn't even feel like there was that much of a narrative. The rise and fall, I didn't feel. I just felt like it was set piece after set piece after set piece. Every now and then, very rarely, you'd get Longinus talking to someone about, well, this guy's not that good, better than nothing. That, okay, now here Drusilla dies, now a bit of crazy, now this. Just set pieces. It really could have cut off an hour, I think.
Even a half hour would have tightened it up for me personally. I also would have liked to have gotten a little bit more of Caligula's motivations.
The thing is, we don't necessarily know them these days.
I mean, true, but it's fiction.
Make it up.
You could make it up. So overall, you know, like I said, I don't think it was a bad film. And I'm glad I saw it. We were lucky enough to see this film. We got tickets from the distributor. And so we didn't have to pay to see it. I guess unofficially they're the sponsor of this episode. But yeah, I don't know if I would have felt ripped off if I'd paid for it. I don't know if I'm being more generous because I got to see it for free or if because it was kind of a historical artifact, an artifact of cinema history that was restored. And, you know, I don't know if I'm judging this movie as whether it was successfully a movie or because of all of the ephemera around it. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I also know that for anybody who knows me, I don't give two flying craps about any of that. And I will say that it's a bad film. It has some beautiful set pieces. It has some beautiful scenery. The costumes I felt were like way too short. They were just trying to be titillating all the time, which pulled me out of it. It combined with the theater acting, the unnecessarily we're trying to be melodramatic sort of music at times, and then weird sound things that pulled me out of it. When they had Caligula's not quite wife yet giving birth, and you could see some of the musicians at the front playing instruments that you didn't hear when in one scene, just randomly, someone walked right in front of the camera. And I'm like, you guys didn't call cut for that? What's going on here? You'd have these weird things where the dubbing was bad or the Foley was bad. And if I'm noticing that, you don't have me as a movie, because those are not things that I tend to notice.
You kept turning to me and being like, Peter O'Toole's dead, but he's still breathing.
I could see him blinking. Close your eyes, man. Come on. I shouldn't see that. And it dragged me out of it. And I felt that any attempt at making art or a film, when combined with trying to do something that's effectively porn to try to sell it, it's like trying to be a jack of all trades, but master of none. And so none of it really worked. The story wasn't that great. There's a lot of, as I said, some good stuff here and there, but then the rest would just drag me out of it. And all the attempts at titillation did not work for me. And I'm a perv, so if your titillation isn't working, then you're doing something wrong. I have seen like legitimate porn that has a plot that had me vested in the relationship of these characters. I've seen one that has made me like drop a tear, man. It was actually good. I felt for their relationship. And I've seen parodies that have great story that intersperse the sex and the titillation that has me interested in the story. It's like, cut out the sex, I'll still watch it. But this, none of it worked as far as I'm concerned. It was all there. It had famous names, famous actors, ones who could act. Money was poured into this, but it failed on all fronts by trying to do too many fronts effectively.
I will disagree on the failed on all fronts position that you have. Like I said, I don't think it's a terrible movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't regret having seen it. I probably would have watched it even if we weren't making an episode. I probably would have watched it even if we didn't get free tickets. I probably just would have not watched it in the cinema. If I was rating this on Letterboxd, I'd probably give it 3 out of 5 stars.
Super middle.
Yeah, it's super middle for me, but little extra half star there for production values, and because I really walked away from this loving Helen Mirren and Teresa Ann Savoy. Like I said, anytime Drusilla or Savona were on screen, I was delighted and I wanted more of it, and I kept expecting more plot or character development to kind of kick in with them, but it kind of just kept circling back to Caligula, and
he was in every single scene. You didn't have anything without him. Any of the side discussions happened when Caligula just walked away, and it only lasted about 10 seconds.
And I totally respect that, and I respect McDowell's performance, and I respect, yeah, it was a little over the top in a lot of scenes, and in a lot of it, I kept thinking back to Clockwork Orange, but there, he's got a lot of really genuine moments where I thought he was doing good stuff. Some people have said that this is one of McDowell's finest performances, and this ultimate cut sort of restores that for the public and the world to see. I don't know if I'd go that far.
Maybe if you cut out the first hour of the film where he was not doing that great.
But if it came down to recommending this movie, I'd recommend it to somebody who already had a curiosity about it. But if you've never given a shit about Caligula, I don't think this cut or the film in any way, shape, or form is going to interest or be compelling for you. So only for the curious, only for if you've either seen the original Caligula and you're really curious about how the new cut is, or if you've never seen Caligula like myself, but were curious about it, I would definitely recommend it.
I can't even think of who I would recommend it to, and that's one of the reasons why I'd give the film sort of a thumbs down. It has good production value, but that does not a good film make. I couldn't remember most anything of the film for my first time, so that tells me that it's not memorable, whereas this time I'm noticing all these little issues with it which means that I wasn't really invested in the film as much as I wanted to be. So that's failure in my books.
So if you were rating this on Letterboxd out of 5 stars, what would you do?
Do they give 0.5s?
Yeah.
I'd still probably just give it about a 2. I would not really recommend it. I wouldn't watch it again. The way I normally like to rate things is 1, I sort of actively despise. It's very rare to give something a 1. 2, I would actively avoid. 3, if it's on TV and I'm bored, it's something that I could sort of have on in the background or not really think about. 4, I might watch again in a year or 2. 5, I would watch again right now. So yeah, this would get a 2. I'll sort of actively avoid it until I completely forget about it and have a scenario where somebody really wants to see it and I basically want to hang out with my buddy.
Or for some reason we have to do it again for the show.
I hate them! Almighty Caesar says, stop. Almighty Caesar says, to balance the state budget, we shall confiscate the entire estates of all those who have failed. Read out your list, Longinus.
So there you have it. That is our in the car, just out of the theater reactions to Caligula, the ultimate cut. We'd be curious to know what everybody else thinks about this, if you've seen it. I don't know if anybody else has sort of ready access to it. It's one of those things that is kind of did the festivals and certain theaters. It didn't get like a release, although it is coming out. If it hasn't already come out, it is coming out on Blu-ray and 4K. But yeah, we'd love to know what you think about it. Let us know in the comments on YouTube, on Twitter. We are for your consideration and at FYC Show. And with that, we will bring this episode of Quick Considerations to a close. Thanks so much for giving us a download and checking us out. And hopefully we will see you next time on the next episode of For Your Consideration.
Until then, I've been your host, Dustin Friesenhan.
And I've been your host, Mike Jozic. Stay safe. Take care.
Ta-ta.